Howdy! Welcome to Cedar Creek Homestead, this week's episode of Porch Time. Oh, I'm not this hot out today, but I do have a little prepping item this week on Porch Time to show you something if you haven't used these yet. I'm kind of a slow learner and have trouble with new technology, but it's been hot around here. Now, the last few days it has cooled down some, but it's still humid and warm. But these things called frog togs. Have you seen these before? And I've got a video I'm going to put out about ways to stay cool. I think you will enjoy it if you're interested in some economical ways to stay cool. This one is a really economical way. You wet this thing out. It's very stiff at first, but you wet it all down, and then you can put it around your neck. This one's never been used. That's why it's so stiff. But my wife done this the other day, and she had me put around my neck, and it was very good. I'm not necessarily just bragging on the frog togs. That you can get these, I think, at Walmart and everywhere. But she said there are some other brands that you can get. So this week's tip, prepping, would be to have trying to stay cool in the summer, and frog togs would be one way to do it, especially while you're out working in the garden. You could put that around. Anyway, got me a good old glass of iced tea, and sure is nice on an evening like today. And anyway, Porch Time, I'm trying to air it each week at 7 o'clock. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, we're kind of newbies here, but if you haven't subscribed, we'd certainly appreciate you subscribing. On Thursday nights, I've got a cattle talk. I've been doing at 7 o'clock. And then on Saturday nights at 7, I try to just do a video. I call it This Week on the Homestead, but just a little overview of what we've done on the homestead. I hope they interest folks. There's been a uptick on the number of people that's watching, and I certainly appreciate you watching our videos. And the whole purpose of me doing YouTube, when I started doing YouTube videos, is I felt a need to share what we do, and not that we do everything perfect or right in our farm and homestead and ranch, but to share with other people what we do around here. You know, I think there's a big movement right now for folks to be into homesteading. Really, I would call us more of a farm. We got a little farm here. You know, old MacDonald had a farm. E-I-E-I-O. Well, I kind of feel like we just got us a little farm here. We got chickens and we got ducks, and I don't have any pigs yet, but I used to have pigs, and I used to have goats, and don't have any of that right now. And I had rabbits. I've got some rabbit videos, but we got rid of our rabbits, and we got the chickens and stuff like that. But what I wanted to talk about was the number one item for you to use in the event of a Great Depression. Now, I say number one item. That's really not proper to say what I'm trying to say to you today. But one of the best food things that was ever used on the homestead, there's really two, but one of the biggest meat sources here, growing up and talking to the old timers, the number one source they had was chicken. They couldn't go buy chicken. They didn't have the money to buy it if people would have sold it. Downtown here, there was a grocery store called Hayes' Grocery, and you could raise chickens and bring them down there to them, and they butchered some, and right there in the store, it had a butcher shop in the back. Their butcher shop, they would bring in a beef and butcher it and sell it fresh right there. They'd butcher fresh hogs. They would butcher chickens, and they would even butcher the same animals for you. So you could bring your beef in there, and they'd butcher it, or a hog, and they'd butcher it up and cut it up and wrap it in that white paper and stuff, and that was pretty popular around here. But that store had everything. It had groceries. It had a fresh deli display case where you would get your bologna and stuff like that. Remember going in there with my mom and getting things. And when you got up to the cash register, they had one of those old dials that you turn that gave you the green stamps, and you may be familiar with that. And they used to give you the little wish books, and when you got so many green stamps, you'd go buy that. And now, I don't know about y'all, but as kids, we dreamed and dreamed about what we were going to get. But that store, you just wrote down. They had little tickets, and they just wrote down what you had. No barcoding, nothing like that. They typed it in the register somehow there, and cha-ching, you know, and it'd tell you. And if you wanted to charge it, they would just write it down, and when you got paid or whatever, you'd come in and buy it. There was no such thing as using a credit card, nothing like that. I don't know if we had credit cards had been invented at that time. I don't know when they officially started, but it was a different world. But people around these parts lived off of chickens. The next thing would be hogs, living off of pork. Pork, you know, a lot of folks say that's the worst meat for you. It's high in cholesterol, high in fat and stuff. But had it not been for hogs, folks around here would have starved to death. And chickens. And so I want to talk to you a little bit today about raising chickens being a Depression-era food source. Now, I hear that overseas they raised rabbits a lot, and I realize people raise rabbits here. This is my hang-up with rabbits, and I read that overseas they raise rabbits on the ground. Here we primarily raise them above ground. Now, there's some videos on YouTube of people raising them on ground. If you're interested in that, that's great. But your rabbits need a complete ration to eat, and it is my understanding that if you raise a rabbit just on the ground and let it eat grass, it will not do very well. That you need a complete, like a rabbit pellet. Now, one thing I tried doing one time is I fed alfalfa. Bought a bale of alfalfa hay. Now, it will last you a long time. You throw that into your rabbits, it gives them something to nibble on. They'll eat the leaves off first, and they'll even eat on the stems. But alfalfa is a good protein source. It's good vitamins, very good for rabbits. The only thing is it's not quite complete of all that they need. From what I have been told, you need to put salt. Now, you could take this black block salt that, like you do your cows, or range block, and you could break chunks of that off and put in your rabbit cages. Or you can buy these little round salt blocks. Now, I don't see them anymore, but used to, you'd buy them at the feed store and you'd wire them onto your cage. I'm sure they're still available. But this is the thing about rabbits. My subject today is about chickens, but let's just say this about rabbits. You put that on your cage, it rusts your cage out. My rabbits, I raised above ground. I went out of the rabbit business now, but I raised them above ground. So I fed them alfalfa one time. I tried it because you could buy, around here they bale alfalfa hay, and it was cheap. I mean, you could buy a 100-pound bale, whatever it weighed, and it would last a whole lot longer than pellets would last. There is a lot of hay in one of them. And the thing is, though, my rabbits didn't seem to do very well. And I kind of feel like, because I've always raised the California whites, or I'm sorry, I've raised New Zealand whites. The California whites are the ones with the little black ears, and I believe New Zealand whites is the total white ones. But the total white is what I've raised. Well, and sometimes I've had some mixed colors that I really couldn't have told you what those were that I have bought, like bucks or does, and had some mixed colors. But I've never had my rabbits do well on just that kind of stuff. So the point I'm driving at, if you're trying to use rabbits as a main meat source, you got to have food put back for them. And you might say, well, you got to have chickens. You got to have feed for chickens put back. And yes, you got to feed your chickens. But your chickens can free range. Now, you have to lock them up. Here at night, you have to lock them up. And you want to wait to turn out your chickens till at least 8 o'clock in the morning. Because early, before 8 o'clock, that's when the coyotes and foxes and things are more prone to be out here. If you're going to see them, you'll see a coyote or something come across here. It's usually in the morning. Now, at nighttime, we have night predators, possums, coons, skunks. The coons are our worst problem we have here at night. Now, unless your birds roost up in a tree, there's a big pecan tree over the top of my chicken houses stuff, and I've had trouble with my birds roosting up there, and an owl will fly up there, land on the limb next to the chicken, and force the chicken off. Well, once the chicken gets down on the ground at night, they can't see what to do, but an owl can, and an owl will swoop down, get that bird, and fly off with it. They really like to eat guineas, and they are turkey's #1 enemy is an owl. And it's hard to do anything about owls other than lock your birds up. Get them going in at nighttime, lock them up, and then you can protect them from the coons, skunks, possums. Possums will kill chickens, and it'll protect them at night, but you lock them up when they go to roost at night. They generally go to roost a little before dark. You lock your chickens up, and then in the morning you turn them back out. The chickens can free range. And this time of the year, they can do very well on their own. I know people feed them and supplement them, but you don't have to spoil your chickens that much. You can throw scraps out to them, all of that stuff. Your baby birds could make it with just ground up cornmeal. They could survive on cornmeal if they had to. Now, if you're raising these big meat birds and all that, you got to have a different diet for them. I'm just talking about your traditional homegrown birds. I love a homegrown chicken better than anything. These new homegrown Cornish crosses and stuff, I do not like the flavor of them. My favorite part of the chicken's the chicken leg, and they'll give you these, they grow these big old huge legs. Now they grow off good, they look good, but they're so big and they've been so bred up to be big. I don't like them. But you take an old young rooster, fryer, that's been allowed to free range most of its life. It scratched the old cow pies. It's ate the worms out of the cow pies. It's ate grasshoppers. It's ate bugs. It's ate ticks. It's ate maggots, whatever. That thing is going to be the best flavored chicken you've ever had. And I grew up right here on this place eating fried chicken that we raised right here on this place. My dad would raise up, and sometimes he would order 100 baby chicks, but they were roosters of heavy breed roosters. He didn't want the Cornish cross kind. He would order, you might have some Silver Lace Wyandottes, Buff Orpingtons, Rhode Island Reds, Domineckers, whatever. But you'd have different breeds, and he would raise them up and butcher them, and you want to talk about the best eating chicken. Now, they grew all summer. And if you got hungry for chicken, you could just go out and kill you some of the young fryers. Before they was quite ready, you could still eat them if you were hungry for chicken. Then when it come frying size, you could have. If you didn't have freezers or a way to keep the chickens up, you would just kill them along throughout the summer months. And in the winter or fall, when the roosters got big, you could let them go. Just let them run with the other chickens. And as you needed dumplings, like at Thanksgiving or other times you needed chicken and dumplings, you just go kill an old fat big rooster. He's too tough to fry and eat, but you boil that booger up and they are good eating. You talk about something high quality eating. Chicken is good eating. And to me, the #1 depression meat source would be, other than buying meat and stuff that's already canned and put up, is chicken. If you have chickens that will set and hatch their own eggs, you don't have to have electric. You don't need to, that's 100% organic. Let them set on their own eggs. Learning that skill. It's a skill to setting hens, letting them hatch, and raising the birds all the way through to fryer size. You keep your pullets. The pullets provide you eggs all year. You know, they may slow down certain types of the year, but you have some chickens that will lay. You'll get some eggs all year long if you have proper management. You can supplement them with laying pellets. You can add artificial light, and they'll lay more. There's all kinds of tricks to the trade on that. But raising chickens, and so if you wanted a prep item or something that would be a depression era meat source, I believe chicken. This is my personal belief, but I believe chicken is #1. My grandfather, granddad, my dad's family, all of them raised beef, but they rarely ever killed one for their own consumption because they didn't have refrigeration. But they raised chickens, lots of chickens, and what they would do, sometimes they would have 3 or 4 hens set at the same time. When those hens would hatch in 21 days, they might purposely set them so they would hatch, You know, sometimes you'd have a hen hide out and set and hatch, and she'd just come up with a bunch of babies. But they'd have 3 or 4 set. Well, what they would do is take all the babies away from the other mamas and maybe give them to 1 mama or 2 mamas and let them raise the babies, and they would reset these other hens, and they would raise a bunch of baby chicks. Never needed an incubator, never needed anything like that. And they would take corn, because around here everyone grew corn. Corn is still being grown here big time. You can go, or you could buy corn. I go buy from our co-op store because they're cheap. If you find someone here, a farm store that sacks up their own corn, is the cheapest source of feed you can feed. Now, getting GMO corn around here is impossible unless you grew it yourself. But I buy mine. I buy GMO corn. I know it's been sprayed with that stuff, but I'm telling you, I don't expect to live forever anyway. So it's just what it is, what it is. But if you want stuff that's non-GMO, I understand, and you do that. And maybe it's for your children and others, but nonetheless, we buy corn here from our local place. And what the corn here is about $6 for 50-pound sack. If you buy it at Tractor Supply here, they're like 9-something, almost $10, and they got up to like $14 for 50 pounds at one time here when corn went high. Now that it's went down, they've stayed in that $9 range. Sometimes they'll have it on sale like $1 a bag off, but still. Shop around and find you a place. We have places around here you can go buy corn, and if you got a 55-gallon barrel, they'll just fill it up with corn. I have a big wagon out here that will go buy corn, and they'll actually chop it up for you at a really discounted price based on what you would have to buy it by the sack, and we put it away. But you could feed your chickens on this buggy of corn out here chopped up. I could feed my chickens for several years on a buggy of that corn. It'll cost me about $400 to fill it up, but I could feed them a long, long time on corn. Now, if you get your chickens used to eating a complete ration, like laying pellets, something like that, that's a good quality laying pellet, like Purina or one of those that there's really been proven for laying, then your chickens will lay better. And when they get used to that, then you try to cut them off to corn, it's going to be hard. But if you raise them from youngsters, and they primarily get corn. The only time mine get laying pellets is in the winter when I lock them up all the time. There's a period, like if it snows or we're getting really severe weather, the varmints get really bad. The coyotes, you can hear them out here howling and stuff at night, so I'll keep my chickens locked up. And when I do, I will buy laying pellets. And they're a little more expensive, and I'll feed them a little bit of that to keep them going along extra, besides they get the whole corn. Some folks say, well, they won't eat whole corn. They have to feed something else. They will eat whole corn. Regular-sized chickens. Now, your bannies might be a different, but I've had banny chickens that will eat whole corn. Ducks will eat whole corn. Your chickens, turkeys, everything will eat whole corn. There's not a problem with that. And if you got baby chicks, if you have a grinder, you can grind up the whole corn in the small chunks and feed it to your baby chicks, and they'll do very well on that. Now, like I said, your Cornish cross stuff, no, you're going to have to buy a commercialized feed for them. They just don't do well. At least if you want them to be ready like in 6 weeks, you're going to have to feed them a high quality feed if you want them to grow like that. They've been bred up to be fed a very high ration of feed and a whole lot of it. But a regular old farm-raised chickens don't have to be. But to me, that's your #1 prep item. I did a video a while back about raising a beef. A beef's a little bit harder. You got to have a little acreage, a little room. But chickens, you could raise chickens in your garage. And I've known of people that had a few chickens just in their garage. Now, you got to control things there. You don't want it to get all stinky and nasty, and it's hard with chickens. I knew a man that owned a feed store and had a little rack of chickens, and he would put those white leghorn hens in there, and he had an egg laying machine, had automatic water. He'd take a little feed and put down through there, a little laying, not pellets, but laying mash. He would put down through there, and those eggs come out, and people bought them eggs like crazy, and there's really just a commercial egg, really, but they would love watching them chickens eating the eggs. If one laid, it would roll out to the front. He would take and sell those eggs to the public and made a good living off of that. But besides getting the eggs, which to me there's nothing like a farm fresh egg. But chickens is a good source. Now pork, that's wonderful too. And that was the number 2 meat source here, would be pork. But I wanted to say one other thing about chickens. My grandmother met my grandmother on my mom's side, on my stepmom's side. She met my grandfather in New York City. She worked in a restaurant. She was from Rome, Italy, and had migrated to this part. And my grandfather met her when she was young, and he brought her here to Oklahoma. And they had always bought their chicken at a store up there. She had never killed or processed chicken or anything. And when she comes here, they had no electricity, and things was quite a bit different. So my great-grandmother told my grandma, said, let's go, we're going to have chicken for supper. Let's go out here and get some. And they went outside and said my grandmother put out some feed and caught 2 or 3 friars and wrung their necks off and started, had some water she had been boiling on the stove and brought it out, and they plucked those chickens, and that's what they had for supper. And my grandmother said she was very shocked because that my great-grandmother did that, and said she didn't think nothing of just wringing her neck off and scalding them, and they ate and they had chicken. And she said it's the best chicken she ever had. But she said in New York City they would go down and buy it, you know, somewhere. A lot of folks don't know where their food comes from. And when you actually process it yourself and raise it, you appreciate it a whole lot more. But getting back on the next thing about hogs, because I know some's going to be concerned thinking I'm bad-mouthing hogs. Hogs could live off of slop. Your scraps, if you had corn put back, you could also feed hogs. You could also, right up here, what we call the old home place, where my dad and his entire family was raised, was a 10-acre place fenced off with field fence, or we called it a hog fence. And actually, hog fence isn't quite as tall, but it looks like field fence, and it's real thick and heavy duty. I don't see it available anymore, but used to you could get what we called hog wire. And that field was fenced in with hog wire. It was about 10 acres, had a bunch of acorn trees, and it had a pond. And those pigs, my grandfather raised pigs there, and they kind of free-ranged on that 10 acres. And every year, he killed 7 or 8 hogs in the fall, and 6, 7, 8, whatever amount they wanted. And they salted it down. Up here, one day I'm going to make a video of it, but there's a place that was the old smokehouse, and they had an area where they salted the meat down, a vat where they had a bunch of salt in there, and they laid the meat in there, covered it up with salt, and then they had a building out there that they would get a wood fire going and smoke coming in, and the wood slats, the wood it's all fell down, but the wood is still there, some of it. And I wish that we could have kept it going. If it had been away, it would have been neat to keep all that going. People would have loved to have seen an old home place like that. But anyhow, that place is, they raised their own meat, and they raised pork, and they cured it and put it up without refrigeration. And they made sausage with all the leftovers. They made homemade sausage. They went ahead and fried it in a skillet, black iron skillet. A bunch of the neighbors would come over when you had hog killings, and they would help out. The women would stay inside and cook a big dinner, and they would also render down the lard and put it in lard buckets and stuff. And then they also fried the sausage patties, and they put them in quart jars. And the way that I've never ate it, I've seen some jars that's done this way, but never actually ate it. But my grandfather used to tell me that it smelt just like it did the day they cooked it. They'd fry it up, they'd put it in the jar and put some grease in there and tighten the lid up, and that you would open that up. Didn't pressure cook it, nothing like that. They just fried it and put it up that way. And he said it was good sausage, and I believe it probably was some of the best eating you'd ever had. But the old-timers ate a lot of pork, and had it not been for pork and chickens, they would have starved to death. But according to the way my grandfather talked, chicken back in the day was their #1 food source because of the eggs and because of the meat, and then hogs were the second thing. And with hogs, they had to wait to fall when it cooled down to butcher them, so you tried to have enough killed to last year-round. And the way they talked, come spring and the hotter weather, they would pretty much have the pork ate up, and then they would switch over to chicken. about the time the chickens was getting big enough, the fryers were, they would switch over that until November, sometime in the fall when they could butcher hogs. So I just given this little porch time today just to talk a little bit about chickens. I love chickens, by the way. I love poultry. And I've always loved chickens. I've had chickens since I was a little bitty boy. If you don't have any chickens, get some chickens. They're fun to raise. They're a ball to have. There was a place not far from here called the Cherokee Courthouse. We're in what's called Cherokee Nation here in Oklahoma, and this part of Oklahoma, they have a Supreme Court, and they have down here, not very far from here, a courthouse called the Cherokee Courthouse, and it's a historic place. If you're ever through here on I-40, look it up and get off on I-40 and take a tour of the Cherokee Courthouse. But that's where they used to have court, and they have these old log buildings sitting there, and they had a man that took care of them and lived there in a house, and he took care of them when I was a kid. He'd mow the grass, he'd give tours, him and his wife worked together and took care of it. And I was pretty young, but he had some banty chickens, 2 hens and a rooster. And the little banty rooster was real cocky acting, and he would act like he was going to get people. So they would chase off the visitors that would come here to the place. And so the guy, the management, the higher ups, the chief of the Cherokees and stuff, said, "You're going to have to get rid of them chickens because it's scaring off our tourists, and so people come here to see what the old courthouse was like." So the man said, he told my dad, he said, "You reckon your boy would like these chickens?" And my dad said, "Oh yeah, he would love them." Well, that little rooster and them 2 hens took up with me, and they roosted on my windowsill. And he was just a little old bitty dude, and he wouldn't hurt you for nothing, but he would come up to you like he was going to flog you, and he would fluff a feather down and come along. And but what he wanted you to do is pick him up. You could just pick the little bugger up. He was just real gentle. You could set him on your shoulder, whatever. Wasn't wild. Our little neighbor lady had a garden over here, and he would go over and see her, and she'd pick him up stuff. But my mom and sisters would come out to put clothes on the clothesline in the backyard, and that little rooster would act like he was going to get them, and he would put them in the house. They would scream and holler and everything, and I'd have to come out and get the rooster. The little rooster roosted on my windowsill. Him and those 2 hens would fly up at night and roost on my bedroom windowsill, and they would peck on the window at night, I guess trying to eat bugs or whatever, but that's where they slept at. Well, my dad didn't like that because they pooped down the side of the house, and because they tormented my 2 sisters and my mom to death, my dad told me I needed to get rid of them. So I took them down to my grandmother's house, one of my grandmothers that lived about 15-20 miles from here, and she had chickens, and we turned him out there, and he lived for some time until something caught him or whatever happened. But anyway, I have had chickens all my life, and I've loved chickens and loved poultry, so I may be kind of partial to chickens, but I believe, like, for being prepared for the Great Depression, a great meat source for another Great Depression. You may say, "Brother, you're scaring folks saying this Great Depression." I believe it's not a matter of if, but it's just a matter of when. We have some kind of catastrophic event that's going to put us into a Depression-era type situation, and having something to make it. So not everybody can raise chickens. Not everybody wants to raise chickens, I understand. But if you're a homesteader, if you haven't tried raising chickens, give it a try. Hey, we sure appreciate you watching today. I kind of get into this wound-up mode about this poultry stuff, but I love chickens, and I love sharing the information I have, but know I've kept you a long time today, and I need to get busy. I've got some work to do here before it gets dark, and I sure appreciate you watching today. God bless you. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you Thursday night here for Cattle Talk at 7 o'clock. God bless. We're gone.